On the 28th of April 1945, stood next to the former fascist dictator of Italy, Mussolini's loyal mistress Clara Petacci was executed in a hail of machine gun bullets. Clara Petacci had dreamed of being the lover of Mussolini since she was a teenager, and a chance meeting with Mussolini led to her becoming a symbol of the fascist regime and of corruption and adultery. She was openly the mistress of Benito Mussolini, who remained married, and in the final moments of his life there was no one other than Petacci that Mussolini wanted by his side. But she was also subjected to a rough and brutal posthumous ordeal, as her body was taken into Milan and was battered and beaten by the crowd of thousands. Clara Petacci's body was then strung upside down from a half-built service station next to Mussolini's body. But why did this happen, and why was she also targeted? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Clara Petacci was just a child in the 1920s when she heard about Mussolini and his political ideas and work. Her father was a very senior doctor and even a physician to the Pope inside of the Vatican, and he was a prominent supporter of the early fascist movement and of Mussolini. His father was a very well-known man, and Clara wrote love letters to the dictator from an early age and stated, after the assassination attempt that he faced, "O Duce, why was I not with you? Could I have not strangled that murderous woman?" Her obsession with the dictator was in full swing, but Petacci would meet Mussolini by chance when his sports car overtook Petacci and her family, who were driving. She was at the time 20 years old, and Mussolini was 28 years older than her, and as the car overtook her, Petacci screamed out to him, and he then stopped the car, and she said she had been writing to him for many years. The dictator was very impressed by this, and he was someone who loved the company of women, especially those who were much younger than him, and he had many mistresses. He planned to take Clara as his mistress, and in 1934 she actually married an Italian Air Force officer named Riccardo Federici, but it was not long before the marriage was practically over, as her husband was conveniently sent to Tokyo. Petacci at the time was meeting Mussolini in secret, and the pair would speak at length on the telephone, and he actually claimed that she was the only woman he could speak to properly and actually be himself around. Let's remember that he was married at this time. She began to stay inside of a small apartment at the Palazzo Venezia, which Mussolini paid for her to live inside of. She was obsessed with the man, and the affair became very well known about. Petacci's family members benefited greatly from the fact Clara was sleeping with Mussolini, especially her father, who was given very senior roles inside of healthcare systems, and her brother also received significant influence. It was almost medieval, the daughter of the wealthy sleeping with the king for influence, wealth, power, and favour. But Clara Petacci would in death remain with Mussolini. After his fall from power, and as the end of the Second World War came around, Clara Petacci chose to remain with Mussolini until the very end. As the Allies advanced north from Sicily and began to encroach inside of the Nazi puppet state that Mussolini had been placed in charge of, he knew that the war was over, and he tried to make a run for it. Mussolini tried to get into Switzerland with Petacci, but they were refused to pass through many times, and on the 27th of April 1945, Mussolini and Petacci joined a Luftwaffe convoy which was heading from Italy to Germany. They probably thought that Hitler would give them some form of protection and help, and on board this convoy were many other prominent fascists who were attempting to flee. But Italian partisans raided the convoy. Mussolini and Petacci were captured, and they were both shell-shocked. They must have known that their enemies would condemn them and arrange for their executions, but they probably didn't know that it would be carried out so quickly. In the evening of their capture, Petacci and Mussolini were allowed to be reunited in a farm, but they would not be apart anymore. On the morning of the 28th of April 1945, partisan executioner Walter Ordizio took possession of the pair, and they then went to a nearby villa close to Lake Como, and the pair were then ordered to get out of the truck. The executioner, Ordizio, fired his machine gun into the pair and littered their bodies with bullets. Mussolini and Clara Petacci were killed instantly, but then the bodies were taken to the Piazzale Loreto in Milan. The bodies were dumped unceremoniously in the square, and thousands of people gathered to give their dictator and his mistress a piece of their mind. The bodies of them, along with other executed fascists, were beaten and battered by the crowd. Some people urinated on them. Many people threw things, and the face of Mussolini and Petacci were targeted to the point where they became completely unrecognisable. Then the decision was taken inside of the square to string the bodies upside down from a half-built service station. The practice of doing this dated back to the medieval period, as it was said to have been an act of the utmost shame upon the executed. The body of Clara Petacci was in the centre of the 5 who were subjected to this, and she was strung up next to Mussolini and another prominent fascist, Alessandro Pavellini. Her body was left hanging upside down for some time, and the missiles continued to be launched at Petacci and the others. But at around 2 p.m. that afternoon, the American authorities arrived at the square, and then they ordered that the bodies should be cut down, and they then took possession of them. Clara Petacci's battered corpse was placed on the back of a truck, and it was then driven into Milan's city mortuary for allegedly a post-mortem. But the US forces were only interested in the body of Mussolini, and truth be told, they were not bothered with Petacci's, and she did not have an autopsy, which was surprising, given the earlier indications. But a US Army photographer did gain access to the mortuary, and he arranged the remains of Petacci and Mussolini in a few macabre poses, as if they were linking arm in death. Clara in these photos has her teeth on show, and her face is heavily bruised, and her body is covered in blood. Her body was not subjected to any form of post-mortem, and with this it's not known how many bullets killed her and what wounds were inflicted upon her body. Clara's remains were later released to her family, and her body and corpse was placed inside of the Petacci family mausoleum, and a few years ago there were concerns that the tomb was too expensive to maintain, and there were concerns that Petacci's remains and the final resting place would actually fall into disrepair decades after the Second World War had come to an end. Her posthumous ordeal was a brutal one, and Clara Petacci had made her decision to remain with the dictator of fascist Italy when facing death. They probably would have attempted to get to Nazi Germany, and they believed that Hitler would give them some form of protection, but the reality was that the war was coming to an end, and a brutal and ruthless one, and the net was circling in around them. The display of Clara Petacci's body was brutal and harrowing, and it would have been a shocking thing to see, a woman's bloodied body strung upside down, but to many people in the crowd, she was a symbol of fascism, and also a symbol of the evils of Mussolini's regime that had brought the nation into a war that many people believed should never have been fought, and Petacci's affair with Mussolini was very well documented in the press. She was very well known about and became a celebrity, and many people, women in particular, despised her. Because of her association with the dictator, that is why she was not given any treatment, which was more lenient, and that is why she was also executed, and why she was subjected to a harrowing ordeal afterwards. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.